Okay, Janelle just replied to me. She'll be on in a moment here. So. All right, well, she should be here in a moment, I believe. So let's go ahead and call this meeting to order and get ourselves moving and try to keep on time here tonight. So thank you for all being here. Here we are once again virtually as a school board. I would like to first of all acknowledge that, due to the nature of our meetings here, we don't have that fact and virtually do that perhaps in your own head. Right out the gate, I'd like to suggest to the board here that we add a new agenda item. We neglected to put on here the discussion we started last month about how to handle the start date of our new superintendent, Mr. Marshall. If you recall, we talked about that a bit last month, and we've got a couple options here to consider. So I would like to perhaps look for a motion to add that as an action item to discuss the new superintendent starting date.
I move to add action item number. See, what would it be?
5, probably just at the top.
6. Or no, A, B, C, D, E, D, F. Action item F, to discuss the conditions of having David Marshall start a little bit early.
I will second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion else on that motion we're hearing here? Okay, I hear none. Let's vote on it here. Catherine?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Janice?
Aye.
And I don't see that Janelle is joined yet, but I will vote in favor. Aye as well. Okay, so item number 2, citizen input. So this month we do have a submission from Mr. Gordon Clay. So I will go ahead and try to read this kind of more or less verbatim as best I can from Mr. Clay. And there's a couple of attachments that I'll have Dee Dee circulate amongst the board. So again, this is a citizen input submission from Mr. Gordon Clay. So he starts by saying, for the record, my name is Gordon Clay, chair of the Curry County Suicide Awareness and Prevention Council, Brookings, Oregon. June is PTSD Awareness Month. When this topic is broached, most people think of veterans. What needs to be understood is anyone can be impacted severely with PTSD, and this pandemic is showing just how widespread PTSD is for healthcare workers, law enforcement, and fellow citizens who have been laid off or furloughed. With the inclusion of questions from the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey being added to the Pride surveys for Curry County for 6th, 8th, and 11th graders in 2014, 16, and 18, we're just beginning to realize how many of our youth are suffering from PTSD as well. And this pandemic is upping the ante, so we must learn the warning signs for depression and suicide, which is a main precursor to many youth suicides, and make a point to connect with our kids on a daily basis. What are adverse childhood experiences? ACEs is a term used to describe neglect, abuse, violence, and/or distressed family environments that children under the age of 18 may experience. The cumulative effect of ACEs can be traumatic, especially if experienced repeatedly beginning at a young age. There is a strong association between the amount of ACEs an individual experienced during childhood and the increased risk for negative health behaviors, smoking, drug and alcohol abuse, and chronic mental health concerns, chronic diseases that come later in life. The CDC shows the questionnaire with these types of childhood trauma, and there's a attached chart we'll pass out, and the percentage of those taking the survey who report having that ACE. And there's a list of those that I won't read through right now. In 2018 Pride survey, Curry County youth outpaced the average Oregon school district in all 3 grade levels for every one of the questions except for one. It is especially important during this pandemic to minimize the stigma about talking about PTSD and mental health and become aware of the warning signs of mental illness, anxiety, depression, suicide, youth suicide, abuse, domestic violence, drug or alcohol abuse, and take the self-check quiz, all of which can be found at, and there's a website listed. Raising awareness of this condition is necessary to remove the stigma and encourage those suffering to seek proper and timely treatment and may save lives. So reach out to your friends, neighbors, colleagues, and especially family members to provide support, and let's all get through this pandemic together. And again, this is comments from Mr. Gordon Clay, Chair of the Suicide and Awareness Prevention Council from Brookings, Oregon. And again,
Alan,
there are a couple, yes.
Could you read that website, please?
Sure, the website listed here is zeroattempts.org/warning-signs.html.
Thank you.
So Dee Dee, if you could please note to pass out, he had a couple of attachments with supporting numbers that we can share with the board. Okay, that was the only citizen input we had this month. So appreciate your time there. And thank you, Mr. Clay. Okay, number 3 on our agenda, the consent agenda. I would be willing to entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks. Any questions or discussion on any of those items there? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and call for a vote then. Catherine?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Janice?
Aye.
Janelle?
Aye.
Okay, and I as well. Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 4, district reports information. First up here, our superintendent report. So I will hand the baton to Mr. Eberhardt this time. So.
Good evening, everyone. Afternoon. Hope everyone's well after what was a pretty big weekend for the school district. I wanted to recap a few things. First of all, thank you Saturday for all of you being part of the graduation, which I think was a huge success. We had every student participated except one that was on the agenda, that was on the roster, which was extraordinary given that some of them have really been kind of out of contact with the district for some time. So that was a big day, and it took approximately 4.5 hours. But I think every family was able to experience a pretty unique situation given the hurdles that had to be overcome. So a special shout out to Christy Fulton and Deanne Veritek and the high school team and the team of people who were there. I know there were many staff members, Miss Nye, Kelly Garvin, the Cleesby families, the Fulton family, Mr. Scott and his wife. So there's a lot of people who pulled that off on Saturday, and I hope I didn't miss anyone. But at the end of the day, it was a great experience. So thank you. The parade Friday night went well too, and that was put on by Safe and Sober. So I think all in all, given the circumstances, big win for the district. The end of the year, every school in the district has its information publicized on returning computers and checking things in. So parents and the community have been contacted by teachers as they bring in the technology. And like I said, every building has specific dates on the website that they can they can look to find out when they check things in. The high school is going to accept work right up till the 17th, which was today, and then grades will be reported, and tomorrow's the last day. There was last week, the ODE did put out the guidance starting the conversations about what things would look like next year, because I think that's a big question for not only Brookings Harbor, but every district throughout the state and the nation for that matter. So I know there was follow-up meetings that were to occur this week. I think the first one happened yesterday. I don't know if Mr. Marshall participated in that. He is privy to the same information that is sent out to me, so maybe he could speak to what he has maybe heard as he transitions in. I do know there's questions about potentially shortening the day or creating cohorts and making sure that students have a certain amount of square footage in each classroom. I know the building principals are working to develop some plans for that. So many questions there, and hopefully you all will be the principals will be reaching out with their teams here in the next week to solve those problems. I would like to mention to Mr. Clay's talk about the suicide prevention. It is a board agenda item. We do have to have a suicide prevention plan in place, and that is on our agenda tonight to be approved. We have had approximately 4 meetings with various staff to put that into place. So I think that is something that has to be approved at the next board meeting in July. So we have a team of folks that are doing that. And I appreciate his comments about the ACEs training, which I know Brookings Harbor as a district experienced last year. And then that will also be part of the suicide plan that goes into place as ongoing training. We did also have our training last week where we had the positive discipline training, where we had Jody McVitie come in from Seattle and conducted 3 days of training. So it was a learning experience. There was some challenges around technology, which we anticipated. However, we were able to pull it off. And I think at the end of the day, put into play the vision of creating a positive discipline culture, which is about communicating with students and having conversations and developing relationships that increase essentially students' sense of community in our district, and that would be for all students K-12. I know Mr. Marshall and the team are going to talk more about how that looks next year and what they can continue to do to further that very, very important professional development that was part of our student investment account conversations and work with our school improvement plan. So I think that's probably all I wanted to mention. Does anyone have any questions?
I want, Chris, thank you first for, I know that was your last report, and just wanted to say thank you for delivering that, and especially appreciate the due diligence on getting a suicide plan in place. And then I had a question if David had a chance to attend the meeting yesterday, or whenever that was, if you had anything to report. I read the document and it seems pretty extensive as to what is required of us this
range I did, and really yesterday's meeting was primarily going over the information that is in the written materials. So it was just some more detailed conversation about that. And they will, like Chris mentioned, they're going to be having a series of different online events. Tennille with South Coast ESD is also coordinating with the regional superintendents and providing parallel supports to help develop the plan. She's coordinating the overarching parts with the region, for example, with working with our health department, which is one of the required parts, so that all of the districts in the region will have a similar approach with those big picture items and the connection to the health department and what are those steps there. So we've actually, I think we're in the process of moving up our admin planning date so that we can have a little bit more time to start to dig in. I know that both the principals as well as the staff are wanting to kind of know what the next steps are, and so we want to get on that as soon as we can, understanding that additional guidance will be forthcoming. But at this point, the sense is that it's not going to be anything massively different as they make the updates. It will just be for
school year. And my hope is it's as least impactful as we can possibly make it. But we need to be following all the regulations and staying safe. The same, just going to
Yes, I agree. And
be a
one
very
other,
busy summer.
if I may, that part of this is going to be involvement from input from our staff as well as community stakeholders, and that's going to be key. We're working on developing surveys to go out and other methods of gathering the input. We have a survey that actually was just released, I think just today or first thing in the morning, that is for staff, and it's to get their sense and get their feedback on what went well, what things did we learn from this spring, and then we'll be turning around another survey. And one of the last questions on the survey was also letting folks know that we'll be sending out some more about fall planning and also putting together an advisory committee of staff members who want to dig more into that work. And so that they'll be invited to come in, and we'll work with them and get their input over July and August as well.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And also, Mr. Eberhard, just a quick, I talked to you on Sunday or Saturday, I guess, but here publicly, thank you very much for your help this year and your efforts, and best wishes in your new position there. So
Thank you. It was totally my pleasure, and Saturday was a great day. I appreciate you all being there.
It was fun. All right. Is there any questions or discussion on the building reports, finance reports, or enrollment summary down our agenda here from the board? I at least wanted to point out that I was sure impressed with the program. I think it looked like it was led by the Special Programs Office and Miss Angela Crum with the summer learning materials that they're able to pull together with the help of the library here in town. One of our friends' children got it, and they're just super excited. So I heard all about it the other day. So that was a great kind of co-branded product there, or project. So thank you for that. That's a great report there.
I will add my thanks to that also.
Good. Any other comments on those 3 items there? Building, finance, or enrollment? Okay. The action items list, item number 5, looking for a motion to approve the Brookings Harbor School District 17C budget adoption resolution for the 2021 school year.
I will make a motion to approve the Brookings Harbor School District 17C budget adoption resolution for the 2021 school year.
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Discussion on that resolution. This was the result of the budget committee that happened a few weeks ago. Any other further thoughts on that? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and call for a vote then. Catherine.
Aye.
Jay.
Aye.
Janice.
Aye.
Janelle.
Aye.
And I as well. Thank you. Next up, I'll be looking for a motion to approve the Brookings Harbor School District resolution number 2019-2020-10, which is in our packet there.
I move to approve the Brookings Harbor School District Resolution 2019-2010-10, the June 20 resolution for special revenue funds.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. Actually, a discussion on this, I would ask Jared maybe just for a quick discussion about the transfer there and what that ultimately means.
Yeah, so this is just transferring appropriations from 2,000 functions to 3,000 functions with all of the money that we spent with the food giveaway and the way we had to do it, all of that we kind of went over our appropriations mainly in food service. We got all that money, we're getting reimbursed for all that money, so it's not like we didn't get the revenue, but we just didn't have enough appropriations in the 3,000 function to cover all of that. We didn't expect to have to spend that much money. So all we're doing is trying to cover our appropriations for the budget so we don't get in trouble with the auditors like we did last year. So.
Right. Now, that's my understanding is just a bookkeeping function more than anything. And then we're whole as far as dollars and being reimbursed for the food services, but just having the right bucket. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Any other thoughts there? Okay, let's go ahead and look for a motion then to approve that resolution. To call for a vote. Catherine?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Janice?
Aye.
Janelle?
Aye.
Okay, and I as well. Thank you. Okay, next up, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the school bus purchase recommendation.
I move to approve the school bus purchase.
I will second that.
Okay, discussion on this item. Okay. I know it's a pre-planned item there, and here no discussion. Let's go ahead and look for a vote then. Catherine?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Janice?
Aye.
Janelle? Okay, and I as well. Thank you. Okay, approval of the Promise Scholarship Award criteria. Perhaps a little discussion. I'll get a little out of order here. So you'll see in your packet the kind of criteria we all submitted. And as I looked through this, I kind of pulled out three things that were a little bit common, and I'm kind of looking for a bit of consensus here. But the three things that jumped out to me are activities around community engagement, activities around extracurricular participation, and then some sort of thought around service to others or participation in a service group of some sort. Any of that ring true to you folks?
I think that the three of those sound very similar. Community
Yeah.
involvement, extracurricular activities, and what was the other one? Service in a group or something?
Service group or service to others, kind of.
Yeah, I think that all is I think that's all in extracurricular activities. That's all part of it. I mean, that's kind of my when I read that, that's what I see. Anything that they do that's not of the school.
Right. Yep. Good point. Extracurricular to me means a little bit slightly different. It kind of school related. Either sports or school clubs. That kind of is a little more extracurricular in my mind. I don't know if that's thinking about that right or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could be right.
Yeah,
I agree.
I do too. If a student reads that, they're going to see that as stuff that's related to school. And I would feel more comfortable. Not all students participate in sports or school related clubs, but they do serve in the community or serve within their, I'm the one that put circle of influence because there's a lot of students who do serve, just not necessarily school related. And I feel more comfortable having a more broader scope so that we can reach and more students.
No, I like the broad scope too. I was trying to picture how to make that a criteria, but
I think evidence of service would be, can demonstrate they have served in provided service and a capacity in any capacity, and share it with us. We can gauge whether or not we deem that a service. But I would like to see some evidence of service somewhere.
I think school service, school participation is still important. I totally agree with community involvement and community service, but I think there's a really good balance that you were a part of school, that you were involved, that you were engaged And I understand that everybody doesn't, but I think that's an important part. We're offering a school scholarship. So your school participation is important. It doesn't have to be a sport. It could be music, it could be orchestra, it could be theater, it could be any kind of club, which are, robotics, anything. But I think the school attach, I think those are two different things, and I think they're both important.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that they're two different things. I was thinking extra, meaning apart from the school, but extra is in addition to. So I just interpreted it wrong.
No, I agree with you, John. The extra, in my mind, it's old school thinking, but extracurricular means exactly those things. If it's band or robotics or sports or those kind of things that are part, involved with the school, sort of, but generally in addition to your basic core kind of curriculum.
So here's my concern in having that as a criteria. And I can think of some students, there's students who are involved, let's say in photography, and there's not a photography club. Students who have demonstrated that they're willing to take the things that they're interested in and go out and serve, whether it be school related or community related, I think is a better, more broader scope. But not all students are able to find what they love and serve in the school setting. And I think there's plenty of scholarships that have that requirement. And I would just hate to exclude those students who, because we didn't provide a club or an opportunity for them to serve in the things that they are, seeking further education, that then they're disqualified.
Maybe it's not to be school related. Like, for instance, my daughter takes ballet classes locally. It's not school related, but it's something she likes to do, and it's an involvement and an activity. So yeah, it doesn't perhaps need to be school related. Is that something that makes sense?
Maybe define it different, because an extracurricular activity, both of those things you just mentioned, photography and ballet, are school-like. They're activities, they're personal, versus community is serving other people. Ballet, photography is something that of self-learning.
Right.
And the fact that our school doesn't offer it doesn't make it not an extracurricular activity. So I would include those in the, if I was
I guess that's the point I was trying to make. Exactly.
Yeah.
The
No, I still
photography
think
club that's private is not, just doesn't exclude it from consideration.
Right.
So extracurricular inside the school community and
broadly,
outside of the
could be
community.
anything.
Okay. Yeah, I think we do need to define that, because typically speaking, if you hear extracurricular, most students think school. They don't look outside of the school. So that's just, I think, if we define it as inside the school community or in the community itself, is a criteria.
So how would you say that? Something like, I like the evidence of service to community, some sort of form of that. That's kind of maybe one. And then evidence of
service to school or community.
I was just wondering if we should separate those two things. Is it maybe two different criteria?
No, I think we should keep them as one, because then you would have, because either or.
Yeah.
Now, if they have both, that's, makes their application a little bit more powerful.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, possibly.
So evidence of service to community or the academic, or what do you say, school environment, or
school community,
or something?
I think.
School
District
community.
community, yeah.
Okay, to the school community or the greater community in general. Okay. So it's kind of one criteria then, right?
I think that should be one criteria.
Okay, so I can hear that. So there's one. What else do we want to kind of factor in from our list of things we have here in front of us? I think we kind of combined a couple of my initial things into that one.
I like, and I'm not sure how to. I think the at Hope students, which we typically say at risk, but at Hope is so much better. Or I think financial need would be a good one. Perhaps that would encourage students who haven't received any scholarships up to this point, or because we have a lot of families who are suffering financially now that, after the fact that all these other scholarships had deadlines due to COVID. So there's a different, there's a change in the, the financial.
So what's financial need entail then? Is that going to be a FAFSA form and some sort of line in the sand for income?
Yeah, that
or
would
how
have
do we?
to be defined. That would definitely have to be defined.
Yeah, it would be. And I'm trying to think of how they define that. How they could demonstrate that.
Right, how could
Like
make it not onerous to
So
show that, I
could
guess.
we, maybe perhaps we can say financial need, and then we can come up with a we can look at what other what other scholarships use to define that. I know that in some scholarships that my kids have applied for, there hasn't been a specific criteria, meaning prove, but there's been an essay that they've had to write demonstrating their financial need.
Okay. I was about to wonder if you had some sort of narrative that would
Yeah.
kind of demonstrate that somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that on a lot of the essays, that, at least, think scholarships my children have applied for, is that they have to say why it is that they're in this position.
Okay. So you don't necessarily have hard numbers, like here's last year's tax return or something like that.
I would like to see at risk as a criteria more than financial need, because, and I'm kind of generalizing and maybe I shouldn't, at risk students generally have a financial need. And they fall through the cracks just too often.
Yeah. So you have a similar thing there, perhaps an essay that demonstrated, how'd you word that? Demonstrate at risk. It seems an interesting way to phrase it.
Well, I bet every teacher in the high school can tell us exactly who they label their at-risk students.
I just don't think a way to practically, demonstrate that or measure it or.
Right. The teachers aren't going to be the ones filling out the application.
Right.
And maybe students aren't labeling themselves at risk. So that might be they call it a negative to even applying if they had to.
That's true. Yeah.
Admit they were at risk.
Show that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just really like to reach those students.
Well, that's true. And that can also, that probably comes out in the application generally, and that can maybe, does that need to be stated? Maybe it doesn't need to be, addressed by the applicant as much as just the review committee. I don't know.
What is the process after we approve this criteria? Are we all reviewing applications, or is there a couple of us, or is it not us at all? Is it teachers? I'm sorry, I don't.
I think it's yet to be defined, to tell you the truth. If you're volunteering, I could certainly get you on that.
Well, it would be just school board members, because this is a scholarship specifically from the school board. And I think what we would have is a rubric. There's basic rubric, and then of course we'd have to have some defining things that we're looking for in essays, and then we'd have to come together and have a discussion.
So I think the criteria that we're coming up with, like at risk, or one of you said something about somebody who hasn't got a scholarship versus somebody who. I'm not opposed to using them towards some of the points, but I'm opposed to handing somebody a scholarship who hasn't put in the same effort as, it doesn't mean grades, it means effort, just because they haven't gotten another one. So maybe in that rubric that you have, maybe there's, like if every criteria has 10 points, maybe there's -2 points at the end because you've already received scholarships, for example. But I don't think it should make you not qualified for it just because you've received other, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't even know if it's okay if a student gets numerous scholarships. If they're putting forth the effort, then that's okay. I don't even think that should be a criteria.
Okay. Sorry, I thought I heard somebody say that.
What about letters of recommendation from teachers?
Might be a little tough to garner kind of over the summer. I'm going to put that out there, but I'm not sure.
Just kidding.
Okay. What do you think, Catherine? Can I ask you? Maybe I can even send you my notes, Catherine.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
something
'cause
around
here's-
wording of
Yeah, and I think that here's our challenge right now. We're way out of order. This probably needed to be more of a discussion item, because we're really, I like where you're going with 3 items, to make it very simple.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I think it would be, I don't know if we even have 3, because we've got.
No, I
we've
kind of got
this-
2 distinct-ish ones here written down.
And perhaps, we can maybe simplify this so we're not way out of order here. Is the third one could just be an essay demonstrating what it is they would be using this. They have to have a clear, defined thing what they're doing. Is it going to be for professional training, vocational training, college? Something specific that they need to identify.
I actually kind of like that. Just a general open-ended, what would you use this award for?
Yeah.
Just to kind of demonstrate that, we've thought about it and I've got a clear need, not an undefined use of funds.
Yeah. So those could be our 3.
Yeah,
Just
I like that.
Just a thought to add some more to the this conversation. One of the things that we are really working on is attendance. So what if we put in something about if we do something around with attendance as one of those in lieu of school performance, having them or having some report on that as a part of what they, kind of a collective of what they put in, because it's something that we're trying to promote, incentivize, make important. So just a thought.
Yeah, no, I like the idea. I just wonder, again, we're trying to catch this year's current graduating class, right?
Yeah, and that's a little bit
Just
hard.
kind of after the fact a little bit.
Yeah. I'm with you on that, Jay, and I think we're, given that we're wanting to include this most recent senior class, that might be a little bit more challenging in terms of them being able to prove, because they're not going to have access to the information.
Plus, everybody's absent for 90 days, right? No, just kidding.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Should we try to kind of frame up these 3 things? I kind of mostly have them framed up here, I think, as far as getting those nailed down. Is that an appropriate use tonight, do you think, everyone?
Why don't you go ahead and read those, and that would be what we would be making a motion on. And then
So what I have distilled down are 3 things. Number 1, evidence of service to the school community or the greater community. Number 2, financial need. So an essay demonstrating financial need. And then 3rd, an essay demonstrating or discussing the use of the funds. How's that, everybody?
Well, that sounds all right to me.
Was there a reason that we narrowed it down to 3? Because I kind of like Catherine's idea. If we're going to use a rubric, it's like when you're doing job interviews.
Kind of fading out, Janelle. Are you there?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're ordering a new computer. Is there a reason that we narrowed it down to 3? I was kind of going back to Catherine's question, because if we're using a rubric, it would seem useful to have more than 3 criteria. I mean, so it might be that you tell them when they apply to focus on. I'm struggling with the financial aid need. Financial aid is for financial aid. Scholarships is for other stuff. And it doesn't have to be all grades, but it's not usually financial need. So I don't want that to be 1/3 of the criteria. I think that's too much.
Yeah, no reason for 3 other than it sounded easy to begin with in my head.
And I think financial need can be defined, you know, like you said in an essay. It doesn't have to mean you're poor, but it means that you need, I mean, you might not be able to get financial aid because your parents make too much money. But on the other hand, your parents are barely making their bills and you have a need. So I think that defining that in an essay makes a lot more sense than having a formula where it's 150% of the poverty level, you know, that type of financial need.
I can barely hear you, Janelle. I don't know if it's just me or.
What was the criteria last year?
This is the first time for this, as we're trying to make it up as we go. What was that?
I thought this was the second year of the Promise Scholarship.
The second year the board has participated in the program. We're kind of lagging. The funds lag from OSBA, and we received the funds this year, and now we've now received the second batch of funds. We've not yet awarded a scholarship. So we've not gone through this process.
Yeah, we didn't get the funds for last year until after the school year was done.
Right.
So.
Yeah, they came in. I can't remember the next school year start or so, or
so
maybe after that.
So looking, why don't we make a motion to, you know, if we use a rubric, Janelle, looking at these, what other ones would you think we can add? So we've got the 3.
I can't hear her.
Yeah, me neither. We lost her.
Yeah, does it look like she's still on? I don't see her.
It looks like she's on, but it looks muted. I'm not sure if it's locked up or what.
Sorry. I was having problems with the mic.
There you are.
So Catherine, you should ask her again.
Janelle, looking at the ones that we have, besides the other 3, what other ones do you think we should go ahead and add?
Oh.
So that we have more.
Got it. Sorry, I realize that a lot of them are duplicates, so I'm trying to not duplicate it. So the like the mentorship, the leadership, it doesn't seem like we addressed that at all.
Those would be good. We can have them give us a paragraph, a short, you know, and we can limit the amount of characters or words they use. But I think it would be great to have those 2, and then they could demonstrate to us how they've, you know, mentorship and leadership can look similar, but not quite, because mentorship tends to be more one-on-one and leadership is more broad. But I think those would be 2 good ones for us to put on there.
And I think both of those could be shown inside or outside of the school, you know, those qualities.
Yep, agreed. So I think if we add those 2, in addition to 3 that Alan had, that's 5. And I think that's perfect. I think we can make a motion for that.
I'm all for it.
Can you read back, Alan, and then one of us can make a motion based on what you said?
Okay, so it seems to be so far the consensus for the criteria for a promise scholarship are evidence of service to the school community and or the greater community, an essay demonstrating financial need, an essay discussing the use of the scholarship funds, and then evidence of mentorship and evidence of leadership.
Perfect. I make a motion that we adopt the 5 criteria that Alan just read for our Promise Scholarship.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All right, Catherine.
Aye.
Jay.
Aye.
Janice.
Aye.
Janelle.
I
Okay, I as well. Good, thank you. So next step, I guess we can discuss this maybe offline, and I can talk to Dee Dee and maybe Christy Fulton about how to put this into practical use. I need to probably do that right now. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on then. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the first reading of the list of 12 new board policies, new and or updated, or deleted in some cases.
I'll make a motion to approve the,
Just the
What are we
first reading
doing?
of the policy. The first reading
first
of the
reading.
listed policies.
okay, I make a motion to approve the first reading of the budget board policies.
I second that.
Thank you. Discussion on that? All right, vote. Catherine.
Aye.
Jay.
Aye.
Janice.
Aye.
Janelle. Faint aye, and then aye as well from me. Okay, and then 5F, our newly added action item here, discussion and perhaps action about superintendent start date. So if you recall last month, we talked about Mr. Eberhardt being done on the 19th. And then there's a little bit of a question about what do we do with that gap between the 19th and the 1st of July when we currently have Mr. Marshall officially starting. So I had a discussion with Mr. Marshall, and he, came back with a couple recommendations. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit. So first is what we talked about last time, which is Mr. Marshall's willing just to be on call, if you will, for the next whatever that gap is there, the 10-day gap or so. That if there's an emergency, if there's an action that a superintendent needs to be present for, he is in town and would be more than happy to help out wherever he can. The second possibility is that he reached out to Steve Kelly and got a little bit of advice there and came back to me with a good, smooth way, maybe just to amend his contract start date and make it simple and move it up to the 22nd of June. So that would be next Monday. And, here's my personal opinion floating in here, but seeing as how we have no shortage of work, including how next school year looks, in addition to, getting everybody's feet on the ground, I think, perhaps we should talk about changing that contract start date.
I'd be happy to make a motion, Alan.
So I'll go ahead and make a motion that we change the
Okay.
start date for Mr. Marshall to be the 22nd of June.
Okay, I move to change the start date for Mr. Marshall to June 22nd.
Okay, now perhaps is a good time to discuss that.
Well, we need a second.
I will second.
Stand corrected. Thank you, Catherine and Janice. So we have a motion and a second to change the start date to the 22nd. Now, for the third time, I can say, let's discuss that.
And I think that if David, if you're up to starting early, I think that would be very good, given that we are going to experience some of the most challenging prep for start of the new year that any education's ever experienced. So a week early is, I'm thankful that we can get it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think under normal circumstances, I really wouldn't be that worried about it and would certainly lean more towards just call me if you need me, but this obviously is not normal circumstances, and my emails are already filling up my inbox with all of the questions. So my only request or question is, unfortunately, we weren't able to get all of the stuff, so I need to make a Friday run back to Hermiston to get the last of our stuff next week. So we can figure that out, but otherwise I'm here, and we'll actually be going into the office tomorrow to visit with Dee Dee about a couple things anyway. So.
Okay, well, again, David, based on our email here a few weeks ago, sounds like you're willing and still are to make that modification to the start date. So
Yes.
certainly appreciate that. Okay. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
I'm very glad he can start early also.
All right, let's go ahead and vote on it then. Catherine,
Aye.
Jay,
Aye.
Janice,
Aye.
Janelle.
Aye.
Okay, I as well. Thank you. Okay, we have nothing under board functions listed on our agenda. And then to note for everyone's schedules, the key dates coming up in the next month or so, the July 11th OSBA Summer Virtual Conference this year. I'm not sure if we've passed the registration time, but if anyone's interested, maybe reach out to Dee Dee and see what can be done there.
Yeah,
also
it's only $50 a person, so I'd be glad to register whoever wants me to register them. If you want to just
And they've also announced that the fall, excuse me, the fall conference is going to be online as well.
Yeah, I heard that.
So I think our budget is definitely significantly going to be decreased in that area.
Yeah, well, on one hand we save money, but it is an educational experience for sure. But it is where we are this year for sure. So.
Dee Dee, you could put me down for attending. Register me, please.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then further, July 15th is our next regular board meeting, including our board organizational discussion and meeting at that time. And then currently we still have on the calendar for July 25th, a transition session with Steve Kelly as a board development retreat and exercise. I'll have to go back to Steve's email, but his organization has enacted some travel restrictions. So depending on what counties in which phase at that time may determine whether or not he can travel here. So as we get closer, we'll have to look at that and make some decisions if we want to continue on virtually that day or make some other arrangements. So, but in the meantime, have that on your calendar, please. Okay, that's the end of our agenda. So unless anyone would like to comment any further, I will thank you all for your time and wish you a good evening.
Thank you,
Hey,
Alan.
real quick, Alan, before we go, I
Yes.
have one
Oh.
piece of discussion that I'd like to bring up.
Okay.
And has to do with where we are with summer programs being able to utilize our public school facilities. I have a lot of different requests coming to the city from high schools, functions, things of that nature. And I'm just curious as to why we are, why we're kind of being inundated when we have a lot of facilities at the public schools, especially for clubs like summer flag football, things of that nature. We also, on the cusp, we have our youth soccer program coming up, which would require some of the school facilities. So if somebody could lend some information on that, it would be greatly appreciated.
That's a good question, Jay, and if I'd like to speak to that, and David, you could maybe speak to it as well. So one thing that we were challenged with is when the governor's executive order came out, Executive Order 2020, it was very specific in what it said campuses were to be used for. Then you had the phase 1 and the phase 2 guidance came out, which gave us the feeling that we could increase our use of different things. About 2 weeks ago today, I think it is, PACE, who insures our campus as well as most campuses in the state of Oregon, came out and they sent a letter and said that unless it is specifically mentioned in the executive order, they said if we do things outside of what is mentioned in the executive order, you would jeopardize PACE covering any kind of liability. So that created a real kind of sent a cold chill to many districts in the state. PACE has since the governor's executive orders last week, the governor's executive orders did include, and PACE did recognize that there is more latitude now in that. So they did send some guidance out, and maybe that's something that David and the principals could look at next week, exactly what that means. But Jay, there was a real fear that if we would have done some of those things, and OSAA was not necessarily in communication with PACE and the ODE. So there was some miscommunications. There was phase 1, phase 2 that was happening where persons in your position as a board member and as a community person in your profession was wondering, why can't we use facilities? So my feeling is now that with the information that we receive from PACE, that we're in a much better place to allow campus use of those for those particular things. David, that's fairly accurate.
Yeah, and also Dee Dee and I was on a SAFE or a PACE webinar this afternoon, and the executive order ends on 6:30. So as of 7/1, you can kind of do some more things unless she comes out with another one. But they have a whole plethora of waivers that they want people to start signing, COVID waivers and all kinds of different waivers. And so we have to get some stuff into our facility use agreements to provide the coverage for COVID. And even if everybody signs everything we need, it still doesn't guarantee us that we don't have a liability. So it's going to be a personal decision on the district's part as far as how much liability do we want to, to cover, and how much do we not want to. So.
Well, and I have a question though. When I read the Ready Schools Safe Learners, there's some specific guidelines in terms of how or when we can allow the community to use the school facilities. And I got the impression that we had to submit that, I can't remember what they called it, a form before we would be approved. And maybe David, you could speak to that. Sounds like there's.
Understand it. We have to have the plan. Most of the stuff in the ODE document, with some exceptions, is you have to have a plan. They have to file, but it doesn't necessarily get directly approved by them. There is a lot of, for lack of a term, district latitude, but Jared made the very good point of that's what our district and board's tolerance for different levels of risk, and that will definitely be part of the work next week of looking at, okay, what would our plan be to be able to enable different facility use over the summer, and that's definitely part of that initial work right there.
So follow up to that question then is, what about organizations that have their own insurance? Like, USA Football covers, flag football, youth flag football. The Brookings Harbor Soccer Club has their own insurance. I think the Brookings Harbor Baseball Club has their own insurance. Does that change the dynamic?
No, it doesn't, because they're required to have insurance just to rent the facility. And then we're going to want this COVID, waiver on top of their insurance. So, and I think there's kind of two separate things. There's those kind of groups that are, the baseball, the summer baseball league wants to start, using the baseball field. And so they're not necessarily connected with, the district. And so like the flag football and, the Brookings Harbor, the sports guys, none of those people are really connected with the district. So I think we have two different things that we're looking at, community use and then actual, is the football team going to be practicing, and what's going to happen with summer school and that kind of thing. So there's two sides to that coin. But in answer to your question, they already have to have their own insurance just to be able to rent the facility. So
Correct. Okay, so I hope that we get on this rather quickly. I mean, it's it's interesting that we have obviously public use facilities open throughout the city, including the pool, all of the fields, things of that nature. But we're restricting our public use facilities that are right at the school, and not being able to provide some of these outlets for our youth, it's critical. And I hope that we really do get on this, and we get on this quickly and make it somewhat of a priority, get it going forward.
and to my understanding, Jay, we're still under the Executive Order 2020, which says we can't let anybody do anything until July 1st. So
I thought I heard Chris say earlier that we were not, that there were some clarifications last week that gave us more freedom.
But I think there might have been school things that essentially allowed us to do things like the graduation ceremony, those things, which under the tighter restrictions, we couldn't have even done those things. And there was, at one of the online meetings, they did talk quite a lot about the disconnect between, if your county is in phase 1 or phase 2, that doesn't directly relate, as Chris said, to our ODE guidance, which comes from the governor, to school operations and school facility use. So there is a little bit of a disconnect, and it can be certainly even more frustrating for the public to say, well, our county's good, why can't we use the school facility? So I agree, Jay, and that will be one of the priorities next week when we meet early in the week.
I want to ditto Jay, because we obviously work with this every day, and it's extremely frustrating that the school district is behind. I also think that we need to be kind of fighting back with PACE. PACE is an organization created by the schools, and they should be working to be a team member. I would have a fit if our city county insurance services was telling us that you can't do this and we're not going to insure you if you don't do this and this and this. So I'm really unhappy with PACE personally, and kind of it seems like it's handcuffing administration. And I would like to I'd like to push back. If I had more time on my plate, I'd get on PACE's board and tell them what I thought. But I don't have the time. So anyway, I really, I'm just going to echo Jay, and I want to get moving on this quickly. And I think we need to have a little bit of backbone to stand up.
I agree with the two of you also.
No, it's certainly important, and our facilities are, kind of a center of our community. And so the best we can provide those to our community, I think we need to look at every opportunity there. So to that extent, I'm in agreement. So not that we're voting on anything, but no, thanks for the discussion. No, go ahead.
So just for my education on this, so I understand, Jared, when you said ODE's guidance on districts and use, and PACE, from what I heard from Chris, PACE easing some of those restrictions in terms of getting insurance, creating some oversight there with the the COVID-19 waivers and whatnot. But where does the buck stop, I guess, is what I'm asking. Since, if the school board was elected by the taxpayers who are paying for our school facilities, does ODE have jurisdiction over determining what our public facility uses can be?
The district owns the land, right? And they own the
correct.
Fields,
I think it's just how much liability are you willing to take, right?
On the insurance side of things.
Yeah, so we open up tomorrow and just let everybody come on in, and then we have an outbreak, and they bring it back to, well, the baseball team was on the field and 300 people now have COVID in Brookings. What is that going to do to us? I don't know. That's the scary part. So, and you're right. If we can take on as much liability as you guys want to take on. So
I think a good comparison would be, it's like you have a car, right? And your insurance company says your car does not cover these particular things. And that's exactly what Pace said. We were not covered with anything that was outside of what was directly given in the executive order. And it was very frustrating to us when we learned that what we were thinking was the extension of their coverage was not what in reality they would cover. And that is something, like I said, we found out 2 weeks ago when they sent out a newsletter to the whole state, all superintendents, and it caused, like I said, a real chilling effect. So yes, I hear you. Like Jared said, do we want to take that on knowingly and willingly when they said we will not cover it? And then you want to litigate? Yes, there's 190 some districts in the state that could push back, and hopefully we are done with that and we can move forward.
Because it's not just about necessarily a COVID related incident. So if we're operating or doing something that's outside of, let's say the governor's mandate or the executive order at this time, then if someone's on our facilities doing a practice and breaks their leg, I mean, that's happened before, but if we weren't supposed to be doing that, then that wouldn't be covered. So it's not even an illness per se. And we did get notice, I think it was at a recent meeting as well, that it sounds like pretty much globally, there's not going to be any COVID related coverage, no pandemic illness coverage at all. So that's a whole separate issue. And that's also something that we're hoping for, whether it's from the federal government or from the governor, a little bit of cover there of saying, we've got to do these things. We're a community service. We're part of the community. We have to be able to operate within certain parameters as long as we do X, Y, and Z within our plan.
This is Catherine. I think our school district's facilities have been used in the community, and it's been a wonderful thing. My request would be, if they come out and say, okay, well, these are the parameters that we have to follow, that we make sure that we first plug in the school related sports, that there's going to be a space for them first. I just would want to make sure that we're not rushing to allow other communities come in and then find out, because of certain restrictions of how many people can be on the field or who can use it when or what, that we don't have space for our own teams and students. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there.
Noted.
The one thing too is I think we're going to be more restricted with our use of the fields than we are with community use, probably as of July 1st, because, one of the things that they talked about today is, do we have to have somebody from the district, watching and, making sure that everybody does their social distancing and all that. And what they said is, no, that would be the people who rent your facilities. It's up to them to do that. If we're opening it up to community, I think they're going to have a little more latitude than one of our clubs or one of our, our sponsored events would have. So
got it. No, thanks for clarifying that, Jerry. Appreciate that.
Well, it sounds like, to boil this all down, Mr. Marshall, puts a little bit more on your plate to, have this, to the best of your ability, the top of the priority list or close to it, try to understand what that means to the district and how we can get things moving as quick as we can, and to what extent that puts risk on the district, and try to understand that a little better.
Yeah, and I can totally understand Mr. Everhart's statement about, there's not going to be a COVID related liability insurance that happens. I mean, you go into Fred Meyer, you're not going to be able to, you contracted in Fred Meyer, you're not going to be able to go back and because you didn't sign a waiver at the door, or any restaurant or any place in town. The city ball fields, nobody's going to cover that level. So I don't know if it's even consideration in terms of what we should be weighing. Now, what David said about violating the governor's orders, yes, I mean, now you could be, there's some liability there. I could see that piece of things. But I feel
if Pace says you can't, if they're right or wrong, but if they say we're not going to cover you if you do this or that for anything, and we do anyway, and like you said, if we had just an injury that won't be covered, I mean, that's a consideration we're going to have to think about, because
sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if that means going back to Pace and strong arming them or what, but
Yeah. So, okay, so that's all I had. Sorry.
no, appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you all. And
Yeah, Jay, I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Mhm.
okay, well, thank you all for your time this month and have a good evening. Till next time. Appreciate it.
Hope you have a great week. Take
Good
care.
night, all.